Hi! I'm here with your not really Italian wedding soup, but my version of Italian wedding soup. I had to make a couple adjustments to it, but it's going to be tasty. Do you see my pot? You don't see my pot. Maybe I need to put you down just a little bit there. Let's try this. I think that's just too close. There we go. Let's try that right there. There. That looks better. Okay. I've made this soup one other time before, and it was really quite tasty. This light is back here is terrible today, since I switched views, and that doesn't make any difference. Okay. We're perhaps putting blinds on this window today. We're going to reframe it and see how things go, and then from there, we'll have better light. So the first thing to start out with for this soup is chicken broth. Now I do use the boxed chicken broth from time to time, but if I'm really feeling like making a soup right, all from scratch, last night I was at a local store and they had chicken legs for 69 cents a pound. I got roughly 12 legs. So I put them in the crock pot with water last night, and I let them sit on low all night long. So this morning, I'm going to have all that chicken for other recipes now. It's all cooked and whatnot in containers, but I've got all the nice rich broth right out of that soup. So, I've got about 6 cups of chicken broth in here, and I'm bringing that slowly up to a boil. I'm going to add 1 carrot that's chopped up and an onion that's chopped up. And into the pan it goes. There's not a lot of spice and seasoning with it because you're going to get more spice and seasoning with the little meatballs that we're going to make. So that's in there. I'm also adding a 1/2 cup of orzo pasta. Look at this. Have you ever made orzo before? Look at that, the little tiny pastas. Aren't those fun? No, I'm not going to eat that. But they're dry. We're going to put those in there. Sprinkle, sprinkle, sprinkle. Now this is going to come to a boil fairly soon here. I like doing, this is a cast iron pot, of course. It's a 4.5 quart, technically a Dutch oven. I don't have the lid for it. Really don't know where it comes from, how old it is or anything. It's not gate marked, so I know it was created after 1900, and it doesn't say made in USA, so I know it was made before 1960. But I mentioned to you before, I think, this is the pot that, where it says 4.5 quart Dutch oven, the D is backwards on it, which makes it a very unusual piece. So I liked it. I got this at an antique store for $8. Looked nasty and rough and everything. Cleaned it and scrubbed it, and I've been using it quite a bit. With Italian wedding soups, they usually use escarole as the greens in the soup. But the stores I went to, like, escarole must be out of season. Couldn't find it. Spinach is another good substitute for the escarole in a lot of recipes. But I'm like, I eat spinach all the time for other things. I'm not necessarily into using spinach. I got baby kale. So I'm going to add about 2 handfuls of this baby kale. That I'll use for other recipes. So I'm going to stir that in and let that get cooking down. I might have to add just a little bit of chicken broth to this to make sure that we're keeping good and soupy in it. And once the kale cooks down, that's going to add to our broth too. Okay. This is the fun part of Italian wedding soup. You know, it has meatballs in it, right? So I took about just under a 1/2 pound of Italian sausage that I liked, and a little under a 1/2 pound of roast beef. Combine that with breadcrumbs, basil, a little Parmesan cheese, egg, and onion powder to make my little meatballs in here. So now This is coming back up to a boil again after adding the kale to it. Now I'm going to make my balls and drop them in. This is probably the most time-consuming thing with this whole thing, is making all these meatballs and standing there and trying to entertain. But they end up being so tender and so good and so moist because they're cooked in the broth. I would suggest, I'm actually using a drinking teaspoon. It's the smallest spoon I got for this. And you want them, it's under an inch. It's like 3/4 of an inch or so. And you just drop those in there. You don't want to stir this up now anytime soon. You want the meatballs to get a chance to start cooking. If you put the meatballs in there and just start stirring it, they're all going to fall apart and be all over the place. So it's nice because they're actually resting on top of the greens while they're cooking. Isn't this fun? Just watching me roll balls of sausage. Now this is pretty much going to simmer all afternoon. We're going to have it for dinner tonight. Lots of household projects going on today, but I also got called out to work this morning, so I had to work from 9 until noon. The hospitals and the sick needed me. Sounds so honorable. So after I got home from all that and running to the store afterwards and whatnot, I just wasn't into hurrying up and making this and eating it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon for lunch. So we did something else for lunch. This is going to be dinner tonight. I also cheated because I was going to make breadsticks. Yeah. I'm not doing bread today. It's just not working out. I can see these cooking along really good in this hot broth. So it's a pretty simple soup, basically. Just a few components. I have one more thing to add after my meatballs cook just a little bit. And then it's going to sit here for a while. I am stirring a little bit, just kind of moving meatballs aside so I can drop more meatballs in there. Do I have a question? Yeah, my beard is doing pretty good. I actually been remembering to comb it and brush it. How many days till Christmas, everyone? You could go even smaller on these meatballs. But honestly, right now, smaller just to me just means that much longer standing here and rolling them. I wore my head into work today as I was running around because I got bedhead. I just pretty much got out of bed and slept a little bit late. Got out of bed and went. This isn't one of my madcaps running around cooking a whole bunch of stuff. I got one recipe to share with you today. This is it. The meatballs are really starting to cook through. I don't know how well you can see that, but you can see they're not pink anymore. Okay, I'm going to give that just a minute. Excuse me while I turn my back and wash my hands. Okay. The last thing that gets added to this soup, and then it's just going to simmer on low. Oh, fun fact I learned this week on my stove, as I was down pulling something out of the oven. I noticed underneath this burner is the one that I use almost all the time. This burner, underneath the dial, says that it is a high output burner. And the back one is labeled as a simmer burner. The stove was here when we moved in, so it wasn't some feature we were looking for. So now what I'm going to do is, after I've got this all together, I'm going to put it on that back burner on the lowest heat, so it just simmers for the afternoon. Okay, the last thing that's going to go in here is I got a couple tablespoons of Parmesan cheese. I'm going to add an egg. Now, I'm going to just stir this up. Just the egg and the Parmesan cheese. So the egg and Parmesan cheese. Okay. There. Now, my meatballs are all looking good and pretty cooked in here. Or at least cooked on the outside. It'll take a while to get them done. So I want to stir this up, get the broth moving around the pot, and I'm going to slowly, with my other hand, drizzle in the Parmesan egg. What this does, it's almost like a noodle-ish consistency, because the egg and the Parmesan just form these little strings throughout, and you don't get that in the canned soups for sure. There, there's a little bit more. Yeah, I'm definitely going to add some more chicken broth to this, because there should be more broth. It shouldn't be just a solid soup of things. It should be a little bit more, there should be a good soupy, a good broth consistency to it. There. And like I say, most of the spice is in the meatballs, not in the soup itself. But I made sure that my broth, chicken broth that I was making, was of a real good consistency. Do all the cast iron on the stove. Bang, 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 cha, cha, cha. Okay. So, I'm going to move this to the rear burner. Just let it simmer the rest of the afternoon. And I will post pictures later. That's hot. Imagine what cast iron on the stove will do. But that's it. And just let it simmer. Make sure the meatballs are all cooked and you're all ready to go. Thanks for joining me. Any questions? Where is the champagne? Darlene, if you want to bring the champagne over and have some soup with me, you are more than welcome. Just let me know when. I'll even make you a whole new pot of soup. Thanks for joining me. From my kitchen to yours, I'll post pictures of the finished product later. Have a great day.